Hey, hey, good morning again, my super peeps. We are continuing on with chapter 25. This is lesson two. Whoop. Empire building in Africa. And I love this map, this image, because what is it telling us? It's pretty much telling us that everything was colonized within Africa. There's only going to be two countries that are not colonized in Africa, and those are going to be Ethiopia and Liberia. But everything else is going to be colonized. It's crazy. It's because these nations are greedy and wanting to improve their wealth. So we're going to look at a few countries within this region. Here's my other map. This is what Africa looked like in 1914 and who colonized it. So here, let's find Ethiopia. Boom. It's in brown. And then Liberia over here. Just two. United States is not in this mess. Right now, I think we only control the Philippines and probably Cuba. So take it in. Take it in. All right. And I'll tell you what, Africa is one wealthy country. And I don't know. I think my opinion, they'd probably be the wealthiest continent if they did not have corrupt leadership. I mean, gold, diamonds, oil, uranium. I mean, honestly, this continent has it all. It's crazy. But let's go ahead and let's break down. Let's look at Northern Africa. I thought that image would come in a little bit clearer, but it did not. But that's okay. We can still work with it. We've got the French. Okay. Um, the French wanted to build this canal, and it's called the Suez Canal, and it connects this body of water. Anybody know what it is? Good. The Red Sea. And they're going to put this canal through here. And so they can go through to the Mediterranean Sea. And so the French are going to do that. It takes them about, oh, how long did it take them? How about we just say quite a while? Actually, I think it was built in 3 years. But don't quote me on that. I'll get back to you on that. Um, that's bugging me. That's all right. We'll figure it out. All right. So once the canal was completed, the British are like, wait a second. You just put a canal in there. I think we kind of want to take over this region. So they basically bought out France because they thought, oh, this will just get us closer to India. It was all about India. And then by the time you get to India, you get to Burma, and then boom, you're in China. Um, Boy, Britain was good at colonizing. And so they bought out the French. I'm getting sidetracked. And now Britain owns this area, and they're like, well, we might as well go in and take out, control Sudan as well. And so they end up, you see here in this image, they end up colonizing uh, Sudan. It's crazy. Yep. A lot of history in that region. Whew, a lot of history. But that's it for just the basics of it. Okay, so it was under French control, and then the British bought them out and took control. And then Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco became under French control. Italy tried to get their hands in it, and they're like, we will take over Ethiopia. But remember, I just told you it was one that was not colonized. And so Ethiopia actually defeated Italy. Italy was the only European country to be defeated by an African state. So Italy was a little humiliated. And so they go try again. And They end up colonizing Libya in 1911. So embarrassed. All right, guys, I'm Googling it. How long did it take to build the Suez Canal? And they just can't give me an easy answer, can they? All right, we're coming back to that. All right. So that was Northern Africa. Central and East Africa is kind of interesting. We got two guys here. The guy on the left is David Livingstone, and the guy on the right is Henry Stanley. Okay, so David Livingstone, he was a doctor, he was a missionary, and he was from Great Britain. And he went down to explore Central Africa, and he fell in love with Africa. He loved everything about it, but he wasn't coming back. And so Britain was like, oh my goodness, we need to find David Livingstone and Henry Stanley. We would like you, a young reporter, to go and find him. And so he went, he ends up finding him. He's like, David Livingstone, I presume. And Henry absolutely hated Africa with a passion, hated it. But saw opportunity. Okay. So he's probably looking at these African tribal people as those primitive people that need to be civilized, and they are the heathen masses that need to be taught Christianity. Okay. And so Livingstone's going to die. Henry is going to continue work in an area that he hates, and this is his quote, I detest the land most heartily. Okay. But again, he sees opportunity. So he reaches out to his British peeps because he's all like, hey, I'm seeing some opportunity here in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Simply, we're just going to call it the Congo. So Britain's like, no, I don't think so. We're not going to send anybody down to help you. And so he's like, well, dude, I still see opportunity here. So I'm going to turn to this guy. And this guy is Leopold II. He is the leader of Belgium. Leopold II is a mass murderer that we should put on the same level as Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong. Books don't teach a whole lot about him, though. Seems like we always just focus on Hitler, Hitler, Hitler. But Leopold II was a horrible, horrible man. And what he ended up doing was seeing Africa and Africans the way that Henry Stanley saw them, as this civilized, uncivilized, primitive people. In the Congo, though, also, they had an abundance of rubber. And rubber is used for tires, cars, bicycles. And so greed, money sign, money sign. And so here you can actually see, this is a great cartoon, King Leopold here. And he's just basically strangling the tribal people. It was intense what he did down there. He killed between 10 to 12 million people. I've seen it higher than that. I've seen, the last thing I read today was between 10 and 12 million. And if you Google that time period with Leopold II and Congo, these are the images that are going to come up. And of course, these people are missing their hands. I'm going to let you look at that for a minute. Take it in, take it in. Basically, what he would do, not him. I don't even think he stepped foot in Africa. That's the whole thing. So did he fell in love with money is what it is. But let's say that my husband was down there working and had a quota to get a certain amount of rubber every day. If he did not meet that quota, they would find me, his wife, and find his children and cut off their hands. They said there were so many hands, they would just throw them in baskets, and show them to the leaders. And these were Africans doing this to Africans. Africans were working for King Leopold. It is insane. Here was a quote. Let me get it all there. He hadn't made his rubber quota for the day, so the Belgium-appointed overseers had cut off his daughter's hand and foot. Her name was Oboli. She was 5 years old. Then they killed her, and they weren't finished. Then they killed his wife, too. And because that didn't seem quite cruel enough, quite strong enough to make their case, they cannibalized both Wally and her mother. And they presented Nasala with the tokens, the leftovers from the once living body of his darling child whom he so loved. His life was destroyed. They had partially destroyed it anyway by forcing his servitude, but this act finished it for him. All of this filth had occurred because one man who lived thousands of miles across the sea, one man who couldn't get rich enough, had decreed that this land was his and that these people should serve his own greed. Leopold had not given any thought to the idea that these African children, these men and women, were fully human brothers, created equally by the same hand that had created his own lineage of European royalty. Congo has an incredible history behind it. But like I said before, it will usually come up with the children's hands missing. Crazy. Let's go down to South Africa. South Africa, you had, it's interesting, the first country to colonize South Africa was the Dutch, and so the Dutch were Netherlands. And you had two groups of people there. They were known as the same name. You had the Afrikaners, also known as the Boers. So same people. Okay, so the Afrikaners and the Boers, if you trace their lineage, they are Dutch. And they believed in white supremacy. Okay? And they said that this white supremacy was ordained by God. But during the Napoleonic Wars, the British come in and they seize this land from the Dutch. Okay, so it went from the Dutch to the British. And the British, excuse me, didn't really treat the Boers correctly. They wouldn't give them political rights. They treated them more like laborers. And they weren't happy with them. And then a guy named Cecil Rhodes goes and he finds diamonds down in South Africa. They're like, well, wait a second, that's not fair because the Dutch, we used to own those. Those diamonds should have been ours, but now they're going to go to the British Crown. That's not fair. You're not treating us right. You're getting the wealth. And so they resented the British. And now we're going to have a war called the Boer War. And it's going to be between the Boers, who are also known as Afrikaners, who are the Dutch, against the British. And the British will be cruel. They'll burn crops. They'll force 120,000 Boer women and children into detention camps, and over 20,000 of them will die because they're lacking food. And the story is the British win. The British are going to get the wealth. The British still get the wealth today. Diamonds that are mined in South Africa, the country, go back to the British companies. They still gain the wealth. Liberia wasn't colonized because the United States used it as a colony to send slaves back. During Abraham Lincoln's time period, we gave African slaves the option. Said, you can stay here, but we'll give you a free trip back to Liberia if you'd like. Most slaves didn't even take that option because they didn't view themselves as Africans anymore. They viewed themselves as, right, Americans. Excuse me. And so now, what has been happening in Africa is that there have been some Africans that have been educated in the Western ways. So they have a Western education. They're incredibly smart. And some of them followed those Western ways and exploited their own people, which we're still doing today. It's so frustrating. Others, though, looked a little bit deeper and thought, wait a second, the Western ways are teaching me democracy, equality, and political freedom, but you're not applying these to my African people. Not fair. And so when they went back to Africa after their education, they spoke and people listened, and together those Africans would become a giant. And what's happening to their nationalism? Boom, right? Increasing. But I'll tell you what, it's not going to be until the 1960s that they're going, the majority of the African countries, that is when they will gain their independence from these European nations. 1960. It's crazy. Great illustration here. Everybody pulling on Africa. Everybody wants a piece of this very rich, rich tasting pie. And again, we've talked about the negatives of colonization. I'll let you read through those really quick. And my super peeps, that is the end of lesson 2. Any questions, guys, just holler at me. Send me an email. I would love to hear from you. And again, I do miss you guys. And I truly hope you guys have a good day.